Welcome to this week's Risk Report. I'm Armistead Whitney. We're going to start off in Aurora, Colorado, the site of the tragic theater shooting. And I want to welcome Michael Dorn, our expert in violence prevention and school safety. Michael, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, sir.
Well, Michael, if someone is in the vicinity of an active shooter, what advice would you give them on how to survive?
Well, my advice would be your survivability is actually determined before the event begins. In other words, one of the most powerful tools that we have to protect us in situations like that is the human brain. And we know from extensive research that you can program the brain. The brain's faster than a computer at making these type of life and death decisions. And so you should use a concept called mental simulation, where you periodically, you don't dwell or lay awake at night worrying about things, but you periodically, when you're in a setting, just ask yourself, okay, if there was a tornado, if there was a person with a knife, if there was an aggressor with a gun, what would I do? And you run through the things that we do. And what we do know is that people that do that tend to survive plane crashes, fires, tornadoes, and acts of aggression, at a higher rate. So what you do prior to the event to prepare your brain to quickly jump into action and for you to quickly respond, it can have a very big effect on your likelihood of surviving and helping those around you survive as well.
Are there any signs a business could look for to determine if they're at risk for an active shooter incident?
The first thing I think we need to acknowledge is that it's been clearly demonstrated you can have an active shooter situation in any country in almost any kind of setting. And so first, everybody should assume that there's some risk. Now, as to your specific risk, there are certain situations where you may be more at risk. If you're dealing with a lot of individuals who have emotional difficulties, and you could have people who are dangerously mentally ill, for example. If you're dealing with a lot of people who might have some form of anger, that can raise your risk. But one of the things that you can look at is your basic physical security. How is your physical security? How is the alertness and awareness of your staff and your communications within your organization? Will, for example, a receptionist or secretary go to the right person if they see something that makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable? Because again, we know the human brain is very good at picking up danger, but we also know that people often dismiss it, and your organizational culture can affect, therefore, what your actual risk is.
Are metal detectors an effective option for preventing these kinds of attacks?
Metal detectors can be effective at preventing target acts of violence if we're willing to run them properly and support them. For example, if you use metal detectors and you do not have an armed person to protect the checkpoint, anybody with a gun can beat it. I did a forensic evaluation for an attorney on the Red Lake Reservation School shooting in Minnesota, where that's how the young man beat the metal detector. They had two unarmed personnel. He had killed his grandfather, who was a tribal police officer, drove his patrol car up to the front of the school. He got out with body armor, a handgun, and a tactical shotgun. He killed the officer, one of the officers, and then just simply went past the checkpoint and killed 9 more people in a matter of minutes. So metal detection can be good if we understand that there are a lot of things that go into making metal detection work. Metal detection, like a chain link fence, is only as reliable as its weakest link. So your access control is important, and a number of other logistical issues that have to be addressed. So if you're in a high-risk setting, like a courthouse, it can be appropriate.
What other techniques can be used to detect or deter a shooter in a lone gunman scenario?
Well, one thing most people don't realize is there are a lot of these situations that are successfully averted. I was a chief of police for the Bibb County Public School System here in Georgia. We actually stopped 6 planned shootings in that one district in a 10-year period of time, and a planned bombing. And one of the techniques that works so well is now fairly stock. It was developed in that school district. It's called multidisciplinary threat assessment. And that's where, when we come in ahead of time, because we have some indication there's danger, and we do an assessment to determine what the real danger is. Another technique that was used to stop 3 of those shootings, and by the way, all of these involve recovery of loaded functional firearms and confessions from the suspects and court convictions. But and then the second technique that was utilized is called visual weapon screening. Our personnel were trained on the specific behaviors that indicate someone may have a gun, and they would then follow through. So they would see an individual on the campus or approaching the campus, and they would detect that they might have a weapon, and then they would be searched and the weapon was recovered. So again, I come back to alertness, and then these are specific techniques that we can use. But a lot of it goes back to that, what is that culture in our organization? Are we getting the right type of training to help spot danger? But then we're also empowered to say something about it when we see a risk. Because in these situations, you often have very little time. You have to act very quickly to avert imminent danger.
Thank you, Michael Dorn, for joining us. We'll now turn our attention to the pertussis, or whooping cough outbreak currently happening in the U.S. Pertussis is highly contagious and characterized by a debilitating chronic cough. The number of U.S. cases has risen to around 18,000 and is on track to become the most severe in over half a century. Now, although a pertussis vaccination is standard in early childhood vaccination programs, it's also available for adolescents, but the vaccine's effectiveness decreases over time. So businesses should take into consideration the risks of pertussis and encourage employees to stay away from the office of experiencing any symptoms. And more information on pertussis can be found by our clients on their Preparis portals. Well, now let's go to London, where security is a big concern during the Olympics. G4S, the security company contracted by Olympic organizers, failed to secure the necessary number of security staff needed for the Games. The city scrambled in recent weeks to organize thousands of military and police to make up for the lack of contracted security. Local authorities insist that with the addition of the military and police personnel, the Games will be safe and secure throughout the Games. So businesses who have hired security during the Games may want to inquire about their security coverage. Well, that's it for today's Risk Report, and we'll see you next time.